Santo Domingo, my city, the place I wanted to be buried in. You were the first and oldest town of the New World, but what have they done to you? You've become so large, muddled and confusing that I scarcely recognize you. To crown it all, they've erected a horrible monument to me, a cross between a sword and a ship. This is where they've decided my body is to lie, what's left of it, but that's another story. I was employed by the Spanish, as no one else felt inclined to let me have a ship, and they called me Cristobal Colon. I would like to claim it was after me that they called the overseas territories colonies, but I guess that would be spinning too much of a yarn. In any case, I'm better known as Christopher Columbus. That's the name I was given when I was born in Genoa, but I'm sure that you already knew that. At the time, I was utterly convinced that I'd landed in India. Who would have thought it possible that there was something else in between? When we came to this island in 1492, after our long ocean voyage into the unknown, I was deeply moved. The meadows looked like the fields in Cordoba in May, despite the fact that it was December and winter. Maybe I was only homesick. At any rate, I gave the island the name, which it still bears, Hispaniola, or Little Spain. We landed in the north, but there were swamps up there, not very healthy, so we fought our way through to the south and set up a base here. We arrived here on Easter Sunday, so that was the name we gave the town, Santo Domingo, Holy Sunday. This looks terrible, frightful. Even worse than the primitive huts that the natives were living in when we came here. I don't like to see my town looking like this. I call it my town, though I never lived here. I had to discover the world. But without me, none of this would exist. My brother, Bartolomeo, was the town's first governor. This is where my son Diego lived, in the first stone house to be built in the New World. It was called the Casa del Cordon because of the rope carving that decorates it. After I died, Diego succeeded me as viceroy. This little house was not grand enough for him then. He built himself a palace, the most magnificent in, what do you call it nowadays, America, as if that mule driver of a Florentine navigator discovered the New World. For me, it was the West Indies, and always will be. This is how people used to live in the colony, more or less. A little formal and uncomfortable, but almost like home. Calle las Damas, the street of the ladies. You'd see people who'd only just landed promenading shakily past the houses here, making sure everyone noticed them. Defence was the most important consideration, of course. We were not the only ones who wanted to conquer the New World and take its treasures back home. Fort Ozama was built by African slaves. They had to be imported because the Indians were no use. They just seemed to die on us. We hardly had to help them along at all. I know that people feel differently about this nowadays, but slaves were absolutely essential at the time, and good business. Later, the tower was used as a prison. My son languished there a while until he was banished to Spain. Life has its ups and downs. In the end, one is either famous or misunderstood. Sometimes a bit of both. The worst thing that can happen is to be forgotten. But it was all to no avail. That English pirate successfully attacked and plundered the island. Well, he did no more than I did, I suppose. And where did he choose to settle, this Francis Drake, but in the Casa del Cordon? The ladies had to present themselves to him there and deliver up their jewellery. But all of that is in the past, like so many things. This place is now inhabited by pigeons, but it used to be a hospital, and it was huge. There was space for 700 patients. It was the very first hospital in the New World. Well, many things in the New World happened first in Santo Domingo. Nothing worked without the church. Even these ruins can testify to its power and influence. A monastery church that was destroyed by an earthquake 300 years ago. But I still have reason to be grateful to the church. A few of its people were very far-sighted even then. Without them, I would never have got any ships. They knew where there was something to be had. Just souls, of course. People like myself took care of the other stuff. And the church didn't go empty-handed. You can see that. All around. Even though it's in ruins. No, this is not a classical temple, even though Greek gods are used to represent the seasons. It's the Chapel of the Rosary in the Dominican monastery. I don't know what the old gods are doing in the house of the one true God, but I'm sure that the Dominicans would have found a way to explain this theologically in a Christian context. After all, their monastery did become the first university in the West Indies. the cathedral. I'm sure that you won't be surprised to hear that it was the first in the New World. I myself shipped the altar for the chapel of the Blessed Virgin across from Spain. This is where I was buried, at my request, in 1540. They certainly took their time about it. After all, as I'm sure you know, I died in 1506. The French made off with my coffin to Cuba. Then it was brought to Spain. But it seems that they made a mistake. They'd been dragging a grandchild of mine all over the place, instead of me. Despite this, the people of Santo Domingo are still firmly convinced that my remains are within the walls of the city. But what of this body of mine, these bones, dust, ashes, whatever you want to call them? Well, when your turn comes, you will care as little about them as I do. And with that in mind, it's off to new shores. There's still much to discover.